The Jedi were supposed to be the guardians of peace, the wisest beings in the galaxy, the masters of discipline and control. And yet, despite all their wisdom, their greatest leader, Grand Master Yoda, made the same mistake, not once, but twice. He trained two Skywalkers, Anakin and Luke, both at an age that the Jedi considered dangerous. He had seen firsthand what happened when an older boy, filled with fear, attachment, and a longing for purpose, was trained as a Jedi. And yet, years later, when faced with the last hope of the galaxy, he ignored everything the past had taught him. Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side was not an accident. It was not something that simply happened because of Palpatine's manipulation, or because of his own arrogance. It was the result of a flawed system, a system that tried to shape him into something he could never truly be. The Jedi Order had failed him, and at the center of that failure was Yoda. A master who had seen the warning signs, who had sensed Anakin's emotions, yet had done nothing to truly guide him. And when the moment came to train Luke, Yoda should have known better. But he did not. Luke was not the same as Anakin, yet Yoda treated him as if he were. He scolded him for his impatience, his recklessness, his emotions. He warned him of the dangers of the dark side, but gave him no real understanding of how to master the feelings inside him. He pushed Luke onto the same dangerous path that Anakin had walked, expecting things to turn out differently. But history does not change unless lessons are learned. And Yoda, despite his age, despite his experience, had not truly learned. Fear had guided Yoda's decisions from the beginning. Fear of Anakin's power, fear of the Sith's return, fear that he would once again fail, and that fear blinded him to the truth that the Jedi Code was broken, that the same teachings that had failed Anakin would fail Luke if nothing changed. But Yoda did not change them. Instead, he held on to the same old ways, hoping for a different result. That is the very definition of a mistake. But Luke was not Anakin, and that was the one thing Yoda had not accounted for. Where Anakin was consumed by his fears, Luke faced them. Where Anakin clung to power, Luke rejected it. And where Anakin fell, Luke rose. Not because of Yoda's teachings, but because he learned to be more than what the Jedi had tried to make him. And in that, he proved that the past did not have to repeat itself. In this video, we are going to take a deep dive into Yoda's greatest failure. His decision to train Luke in the same way he trained Anakin, despite knowing where that path would lead. We will examine why he ignored the lessons of the past, why fear clouded his judgment, and how, in the end, it was Luke, not Yoda, who truly changed the fate of the Jedi. The Jedi Code was built on discipline, patience, and a deep connection to the Force. Yet Yoda himself hesitated when Luke Skywalker arrived on Dagobah, seeking his guidance. He muttered about the boy's recklessness, his impatience, and his resemblance to his father. But why did Yoda believe Luke was so much like Anakin if he still chose to train him? For years, Yoda had blamed himself for Anakin's downfall. He'd watched the boy grow into a man filled with passion, fear, and a desperate need for attachment. The same emotions that led Anakin to the dark side were now present in Luke. And despite seeing these warning signs, Yoda allowed history to repeat itself. Yoda spoke as if training Luke was a mistake before it even began. He questioned Obi-Wan's decision and doubted that the boy could succeed. But rather than standing by his own doubts, he gave in and took Luke as his apprentice. The same mistake was made when he allowed Anakin's training to proceed years ago. The Jedi Code had once been sacred to Yoda. It was supposed to protect the Order from the dangers of fear and attachment. Yet, in Luke's case, Yoda disregarded these very rules and did what he had once scolded others for doing. He trained Luke out of desperation, just as he had done with Anakin. Training a Jedi from infancy was meant to prevent dangerous emotions from forming. The younger the child, the easier it was to shape their mind in the ways of the Force. Anakin had already been too old when Qui-Gon Jinn discovered him, and the same was true for Luke. So why did Yoda break the same rule twice? The answer was desperation. The Jedi were gone, the galaxy was in darkness, and Luke was their last hope. But Yoda knew that training a Jedi so late in life had already led to disaster before. He had seen Anakin's attachments take control of him, yet he ignored those same risks in Luke. Luke already carried the weight of loss, anger, and fear. He had lost his family, fought for a rebellion, and had a personal stake in Vader's defeat. These were not the makings of a Jedi trained in peace and selflessness. And still, Yoda chose to repeat the cycle, ignoring the danger in front of him. By training Luke at such an old age, Yoda risked creating another Vader. He had always believed that fear led to suffering, yet he allowed fear to dictate his own actions. He feared the Sith's victory so much that he trained Luke despite every warning sign. And in doing so, he made the same mistake again. Yoda spoke of Anakin with regret, but he never truly acknowledged the root of his fall. He blamed fear, attachment, and recklessness, but he never considered his own failure in guiding Anakin. And now, with Luke, he had the chance to right those wrongs. Yet he did not. He should have told Luke the truth. He should have spoken of Anakin's struggles, his weaknesses, and the pain that led him to the dark side. He should have prepared Luke for the possibility that history would try to repeat itself. But instead, he kept the past buried, offering only half-truths and cryptic warnings. Luke had a right to know who his father was before facing him in battle. Instead, he was led blindly into a conflict he did not fully understand. Yoda, fearing the pain that the truth would bring, allowed Luke to stumble toward his fate with only fragments of knowledge. And in doing so, he ensured that Luke would face the same painful revelations that Anakin once had. When Luke finally learned the truth, it nearly broke him. The weight of that moment was not just the revelation of Vader's identity. It was the realization that his mentors, the very people he had trusted, had deceived him. And Yoda, once again, had let his own fear dictate his choices. Despite Yoda's fears, Luke was not his father. He may have shared Anakin's impulsiveness, his emotions, and his need for purpose, but he was not the same. Yoda failed to see this. He had convinced himself that training Luke would end in another disaster, but he never considered that Luke was different from Anakin in crucial ways. Anakin had been raised under the Jedi Code, forced to suppress his emotions, while they still raged inside him. Luke had never lived under those restrictions. He had always allowed himself to feel, to care, to form attachments, and instead of breaking him, it gave him strength. When Anakin was faced with losing Padme, his fear drove him to darkness. When Luke was faced with losing Han and Leia, his love for them drove him forward. The difference was clear, but Yoda did not see it. He lumped Luke together with his father, treating him as a ticking time bomb rather than a person who could forge his own path. This was Yoda's greatest blindness. He assumed that fate was inevitable, that Luke would follow Anakin's footsteps, no matter what. But fate is shaped by choices, and Luke's choices were his own. Yoda failed to recognize that until it was too late. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. Yoda spoke these words as if they were absolute, yet his own actions were driven by fear. Fear of repeating his past failures, fear of losing everything, fear of what Luke could become. And in that fear, he made the same mistake twice. If fear truly led to suffering, then Yoda should have been the first to fall. His choices were built on it. His hesitations were driven by it. He feared training Luke, yet he did it anyway. He feared telling him the truth, yet he kept it hidden. He feared losing to the Sith, yet he did nothing to change his own ways. Yoda had spent centuries preaching control over emotions, but he never truly followed that lesson himself. He had let the fear of the Sith cloud his judgment, pushing the Jedi into war instead of guiding them toward a better way. And now, with Luke, that same fear led him to handle things the same way he had before. In his desperation to avoid the mistakes of the past, he made them again. Fear had dictated his choices just as much as it had Anakin's. The difference was that Yoda never acknowledged his own hypocrisy. It was only at the very end, when death was upon him, that Yoda finally admitted the truth. He had failed. It was a rare moment of vulnerability, an admission from the Jedi's greatest master that he had been wrong. But that realization had come too late. He had spent too long believing in the old ways, too long trusting that discipline and detachment were the keys to strength. But he had seen the truth in Luke's actions. The boy had defied every Jedi teaching, yet he had proven himself in a way no Jedi before him had. Luke had done what the Jedi had never done before. He had faced the dark side and turned away, not out of duty, but out of love. Yoda finally saw the power in that. He finally saw that Luke was not a failure, but a lesson in what the Jedi could have been all along. In the end, Yoda's greatest act of wisdom was not training Luke, it was letting go. And in doing so, he left the fate of the Jedi in hands far wiser than his own. Yoda's failure was not training Luke. It was training Luke the same way he had trained Anakin. He had treated them as the same, assuming that they would share the same fate. But destiny is shaped by choice, and Luke was not his father. The Jedi had always clung to their rules, but Luke had proven that the old ways were not the only way. He found strength in his emotions, in his love for others, in his ability to choose kindness over destruction. And that was something the Jedi had never understood. Yoda realized this too late, but in that realization, he found peace. He saw that Luke was more than a Jedi of the past. He was the Jedi of the future. The true lesson of Yoda's story is not just about failure. It is about the wisdom to recognize when change is needed. And in the end, Yoda finally saw what the Jedi had never seen before. That love, not detachment, was the path to true strength. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to subscribe to Critical Analysis Hub for deep dives into the Star Wars movies, and check out Critical Analysis Hub Plus for case studies on Star Wars shows. Also, if you want to rep the fandom in style, check out the bio for awesome Star Wars Legos and Funko Pops. May the Force be with you. I'll see you in the next one.